The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "You can come." "Braxton," my mother Janet said, not even looking up from her coffee cup at the family breakfast table. "But don't get too comfortable. No one really wants you here." The Lake Tahoe cabin vacation had been a family tradition for 3 generations, but this felt different. Cold, calculated. My brother Derek smirked from across the table while my cousins Amanda and Tyler exchanged knowing glances. 6 months since Grandfather William's funeral, and I finally understood where I stood in this family hierarchy. I nodded, silently, pushed back my chair and walked out without another word, knowing this public humiliation would be the absolute last time they treated me like an unwanted outsider. The 30-minute drive back to my apartment in downtown Sacramento felt like the longest journey of my 28 years. Rain pelted against my windshield as I replayed those venomous words over and over. Janet had delivered them with such casual cruelty, like she was commenting on the weather. The family cabin at Lake Tahoe represented everything sacred about our heritage. Grandfather William had built it with his own hands in 1957, and every summer of my childhood had been spent there, learning to fish, hiking mountain trails, and listening to his stories around the campfire. But everything changed after his funeral 6 months ago. Janet transformed overnight from a somewhat distant but tolerable mother into something unrecognizable. She started treating Derek like royalty while making it clear that I was merely tolerated. Family dinners became exercises in emotional warfare, with Derek receiving praise for the smallest accomplishments, while my achievements went completely unnoticed. I thought about calling my girlfriend Sarah, but we had broken up 3 weeks earlier after a massive fight about my family problems. She kept telling me I needed to stand up for myself instead of just taking their abuse. Maybe she was right, but these people were supposed to love me unconditionally. How do you fight against your own blood? My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Hope you enjoyed breakfast, loser. See you at the cabin." "Oh, wait, you probably won't be staying long anyway." Something inside me snapped. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and made a phone call I should have made months ago. Harold Peterson had been Grandfather William's attorney for over 40 years, handling everything from business contracts to his will. If anyone could give me answers about why my family suddenly hated me, it would be Harold. "Braxton." Harold's gravelly voice sounded surprised when his secretary put me through. "I was wondering when you'd contact me. We need to talk immediately. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" 3 hours later, I sat in Harold's mahogany-paneled office as he spread documents across his desk with trembling hands. At 78 years old, Harold had seen enough family drama to fill several lifetimes, but the expression on his weathered face told me this situation was particularly troubling. "Your grandfather left you a substantial trust fund." Harold began adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. $2.7 million to be exact, plus 40% ownership in Peterson Construction Company. Your mother has been intercepting all correspondence from my office for the past 6 months. The words didn't register immediately. I stared at the legal document, seeing my name typed in official black ink next to numbers that seemed impossible. That can't be right. Derek inherited everything. Janet told the whole family at the funeral reception. Harold shook his head grimly. "Your mother has been lying to everyone, including Derek. Your grandfather specifically wrote in his will that he was disappointed in Derek's character and work ethic. He believed you were the only family member with integrity and vision to carry on the family legacy." My hands shook as I picked up the will, reading Grandfather William's handwritten notes in the margins. He had documented Derek's gambling problems, his failed business ventures, and his complete lack of responsibility. But more shocking was what he wrote about Janet. "I fear my daughter-in-law has been stealing from the business for years. Braxton is the only one I trust to investigate and clean up this mess after I'm gone." "Harold, why didn't you contact me directly when I didn't respond to your letters?" The old lawyer sighed heavily. Your mother convinced me you were traveling extensively for work and that she was handling all family correspondence. She showed me what appeared to be your signature on documents stating you wanted Derek to manage everything until you returned. I should have been more suspicious, but Janet can be very persuasive. As Harold continued explaining the legal complexities, the pieces of a horrifying puzzle began falling into place. The cabin vacation wasn't a family reunion at all. It was a celebration of Derek's fraudulent inheritance, orchestrated by Janet to rub salt in wounds she had inflicted through systematic deception. But the most shocking revelation came when Harold opened a sealed envelope that Grandfather William had left, with specific instructions to open only if I personally contacted the law office. Braxton, your grandfather, suspected your mother might try to steal your inheritance. He hired a private investigator 6 months before his death. Harold handed me a thick folder. The evidence inside will disturb you, but you need to know the truth. The investigator's report detailed years of financial manipulation and fraud. Janet had been embezzling money from the family construction business since Derek graduated high school, using forged documents and fake invoices to funnel cash into secret accounts. She had convinced Derek that the money was his rightful inheritance, making him complicit in crimes he didn't fully understand. The final page of the report contained the most devastating information of all. Janet had been systematically stealing funds that were supposed to support my college education and career development, while I struggled to pay for business school and worked multiple jobs to survive. She was living lavishly off money that rightfully belonged to me. There's more, Harold said quietly. Your grandfather's medical records show he died from gradual poisoning. The coroner ruled it natural causes because he was 86, but the private investigator found evidence that someone was slowly administering small doses of antifreeze to his food over several months. The room started spinning. Murder. My mother had murdered my grandfather to steal my inheritance and give it to Derek. The woman who raised me, who kissed my scraped knees and helped with homework, was a calculating killer who had destroyed the man I loved most in this world. We have enough evidence to press criminal charges, Harold continued. But I wanted to speak with you first. This will destroy your family, Braxton. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Janet's cruel words that morning, Derek's smug smile, and the years of emotional abuse I had endured while they lived off stolen money. My grandfather had trusted me to seek justice for his murder and protect the family legacy he had built through honest hard work. File the charges, I said firmly. And Harold, I want to attend that cabin vacation. It's time my family learned who they're really dealing with. The next morning I met Harold at his office to dive deeper into the evidence. The private investigator's files were more extensive than I had initially realized. Patricia Hendricks, a former FBI agent turned private detective, had spent 6 months documenting a criminal enterprise that made my blood run cold. Your mother is far more sophisticated than we initially thought, Harold explained as he spread surveillance photos across the conference table. She's been running a complex money laundering operation through the construction business for over 8 years. The photos showed Janet meeting with suspicious characters in parking lots, transferring briefcases and conducting business at offshore banking locations. But what struck me most was seeing Derek in several photos clearly participating in activities he had to know were illegal. Patricia's report revealed that Janet had been using Peterson Construction to clean money for several criminal organizations in Northern California. Legitimate construction projects were being inflated by 300%, with the excess money being funneled back to drug dealers, human traffickers, and organized crime figures. The cabin sale is just the tip of the iceberg, Harold continued. Your mother has been planning to liquidate all family assets and disappear with Derek. They have new identities prepared and accounts set up in the Cayman Islands. I studied financial records showing millions of dollars flowing through fake corporations that existed only on paper. Janet had created an entire network of shell companies using Derek's social security number and forged documents to make him appear as the legitimate business owner. But here's what really shocked Patricia, Harold said, opening a sealed medical file. Derek isn't your biological brother. The DNA test results were unmistakable. Derek shared no genetic markers with either me or my deceased father. Janet had been having an affair with a man named Marcus Sullivan, a convicted felon with connections to organized crime families in Las Vegas. Your grandfather discovered this truth about 3 years ago, Harold explained. That's when he hired Patricia to investigate. He realized Janet had been using Derek as a front for criminal activities since he turned 18. The timeline made sickening sense. Derek's sudden business success after high school, his expensive cars and clothes despite no visible income, and his arrogant attitude toward honest work. He wasn't just complicit in Janet's crimes. He was her partner in a criminal enterprise that had been operating under our family name for nearly a decade. But the most disturbing revelation came from recorded conversations Patricia had captured using surveillance equipment. Janet had been planning to frame me for the entire money laundering operation. She had planted evidence in my old apartment, created fake documents showing I was the mastermind behind the criminal activity, and was preparing to turn me over to federal authorities after stealing my inheritance. She's been telling Derek that you're a dangerous criminal who murdered your grandfather, Harold said, playing an audio recording. Listen to this conversation from last week. Janet's voice filled the room. Braxton has always been unstable, Derek. When he discovers we inherited everything, he might try to hurt us. We need to be prepared to defend ourselves. Derek's response chilled me. Maybe we should eliminate the problem permanently, Mom. Make it look like an accident. They were planning to kill me. My mother and the man I thought was my brother were discussing my murder like they were planning a grocery list. The family vacation at the cabin wasn't a celebration. It was going to be my execution. Patricia's investigation had uncovered surveillance footage of Janet purchasing untraceable cell phones, researching poison methods online, and meeting with Marcus Sullivan to discuss handling the Braxton situation. They had been planning this for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity to eliminate the only person who could expose their crimes. There's more, Harold said grimly. Your cousins Amanda and Tyler aren't innocent bystanders. They've been helping launder money through their own businesses for the past 2 years. The evidence showed Amanda's boutique clothing store and Tyler's automotive repair shop were both being used to process illegal funds. Fake sales receipts, inflated invoices, and cash transactions that exceeded any legitimate business activity. My entire extended family had been corrupted by Janet's criminal influence. But perhaps most heartbreaking was discovering that my father's death 3 years earlier hadn't been the heart attack everyone believed. Patricia had obtained his medical records and found evidence of the same slow poisoning that killed my grandfather. Janet had been systematically murdering the men in our family to maintain control of the business and avoid exposure of her crimes. She's a serial killer. Braxton, Harold said quietly. Your father, your grandfather, and now she's planning to add you to the list. The only question is whether we can stop her before the cabin vacation. I stared at the mountain of evidence, feeling overwhelmed by the scope of Janet's evil. This wasn't just theft or fraud. It was a multi-generational conspiracy to destroy my family from the inside while profiting from our destruction. What are my options legally? I asked. We could contact the FBI immediately and have them arrested before the cabin trip, Harold replied. But Janet is clever. She's probably prepared for that possibility. If she suspects we're onto her, she might accelerate her timeline and try to kill you sooner. I thought about Sarah's words during our breakup, you need to stop being passive and start fighting back. She was right. My entire life I had been reacting to Janet's manipulation instead of taking control of the situation. I want to go to the cabin as planned, I decided. But I'm going to gather additional evidence and record their confessions. If they think they're about to get away with everything, they might reveal details we don't have yet. Harold looked concerned. That's extremely dangerous, Braxton. These people have killed twice. They won't hesitate to kill you. They're planning to kill me anyway, I replied. At least this way I can ensure justice for my father and grandfather, and maybe save other potential victims from Janet's future crimes. As I drove home that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the man I had called my brother for 26 years. Derek wasn't family at all. He was the son of a criminal, raised by a murderer to help destroy everything my grandfather had built. Yet part of me still felt sorry for him. He had been manipulated by Janet, just like I had, though he had chosen to participate willingly in activities he knew were wrong. The real question was whether I had the courage to face down a serial killer and her criminal network, knowing that one mistake could cost me my life. But looking at photos of my father and grandfather, remembering their love and guidance throughout my childhood, I knew there was only one choice. Justice demanded courage, and courage demanded action. The cabin vacation would happen as planned, but this time the hunters were about to become the hunted. For the next 5 days, I transformed myself into someone I never thought I could be: a detective, gathering evidence against my own family. Patricia Hendricks agreed to help me prepare for what she called the most dangerous undercover operation she'd ever supervised. We met at a warehouse outside Sacramento where Patricia had set up a command center with enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small city. Banks of computer screens showed satellite views of the Lake Tahoe cabin, real-time traffic cameras, and communication intercepts from Janet and Derek's cell phones. First rule of undercover work, Patricia explained as she fitted me with a nearly invisible recording device. Never let emotion compromise your judgment. These people have murdered twice. They'll kill you without hesitation if they suspect you're gathering evidence. The recording equipment was more sophisticated than anything I'd seen in movies. A tiny microphone disguised as a shirt button could pick up conversations from 30 feet away. A GPS tracker sewn into my jacket would allow Patricia to monitor my location at all times. Most importantly, a panic button disguised as a pen would summon federal backup if the situation turned deadly. Your mother has been busy since your breakfast confrontation, Patricia said, showing me recent surveillance footage. She's moved $2.8 million into offshore accounts and purchased airline tickets to the Cayman Islands for next Tuesday. The timeline was clear. They planned to kill me during the cabin vacation, then disappear forever with my stolen inheritance. But Patricia had discovered something even more disturbing in their recent communications. Derek has been researching methods for disposing of bodies in Lake Tahoe, she continued. He's purchased concrete blocks chains and a boat rental for this weekend. They're not just planning to kill you. They're planning to make sure you're never found. I watched security footage of Derek loading suspicious equipment into a rented truck. The man I had grown up with, played baseball with, and considered my closest family member was preparing to murder me and dump my body in the lake where we had spent countless happy summers as children. But the most shocking discovery came from intercepted phone calls between Janet and Marcus Sullivan, Derek's biological father. Marcus was flying in from Las Vegas to help with what they were calling the final cleanup operation. Marcus Sullivan has connections to professional killers, Patricia explained. This isn't going to be some amateur murder plot. They're bringing in someone with experience making people disappear permanently. Over the following days, I learned more about surveillance techniques than most police officers know in their entire careers. Patricia taught me how to plant listening devices, copy computer files, and document criminal activity without being detected. She also prepared me for the psychological challenges of watching people I once loved planning my death. The hardest part will be acting normal around them, she warned. You have to pretend you still trust them while gathering evidence of their plans to kill you. Most people can't handle that level of psychological stress. We spent hours practicing scenarios where I would need to remain calm while recording confessions or documenting criminal activity. Patricia had me rehearse responses to direct accusations, threats of violence, and situations where I might need to escape quickly. The surveillance operation began on Wednesday, 3 days before the scheduled cabin trip. Patricia positioned herself in a rented cabin half a mile from the family property, using high-powered listening equipment to monitor all communications in and around the target location. Meanwhile, I installed hidden cameras throughout my apartment, expecting that Derek might break in to plant additional evidence or steal information. Sure enough, on Thursday evening, surveillance cameras caught Derek and Tyler entering my apartment using a copied key. They spent 2 hours planting drug paraphernalia fake financial documents and a computer hard drive containing child pornography. The evidence they were planting would destroy my reputation and credibility if I tried to expose their crimes. Even if I survived their murder attempt, they were ensuring that no one would believe my accusations. But they made one critical mistake. Derek called Janet from inside my apartment to confirm they had successfully planted all the evidence. The conversation was recorded by devices Patricia had placed throughout the building. "Everything's in place, Mom," Derek said. "If Braxton somehow survives this weekend, the cops will think he's a drug-dealing pedophile. No one will believe anything he says about us." Janet's response revealed the full scope of their psychological manipulation. "Perfect. Marcus arrives tomorrow night. Once we're finished at the cabin, we'll call in an anonymous tip about Braxton's illegal activities. Even if his body is never found, everyone will assume he fled the country to avoid prosecution." Friday morning brought the most disturbing revelation yet. Patricia intercepted communications showing that I wasn't their only intended victim. They were also planning to kill Amanda and Tyler after using them to help dispose of my body. Janet wanted to eliminate anyone who could connect her to the money laundering operation. "Your mother is tying up loose ends," Patricia explained. "She's planning to murder her own niece and nephew to protect herself. This woman is a genuine psychopath." The surveillance equipment revealed conversations where Janet casually discussed murdering Amanda and Tyler as if she were planning a dinner menu. She had already drained their business accounts and planted evidence to make them appear as willing participants in crimes they barely understood. As Friday evening approached, I received a cheerful phone call from Janet confirming plans for the cabin vacation. Her voice was warm and motherly, expressing excitement about spending quality family time together. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. She sounded like a loving parent while simultaneously planning multiple murders. "Don't forget to bring your hiking boots, sweetheart," she said. "We're planning some beautiful trail walks this weekend. It'll be so peaceful and quiet up there." The irony wasn't lost on me. Those hiking trails would probably be where they planned to ambush and kill me, far from any witnesses or potential rescue. That night, I barely slept. Patricia had given me sleeping pills, but my mind raced through everything I had learned about the people who raised me. Janet wasn't just a criminal. She was a master manipulator who had been planning my destruction since childhood, grooming Derek to help her while systematically eliminating anyone who might interfere with her plans. But I also felt something unexpected: determination. My father and grandfather had been murdered by this woman, and she was planning to add me to her list of victims. However, unlike her previous targets, I knew what was coming. For the first time in our relationship, I held the advantage. Saturday morning, I loaded my car with legitimate vacation supplies while secretly carrying enough recording equipment to document whatever confessions or criminal activity occurred at the cabin. Patricia would be monitoring everything from her command post with federal agents on standby to intervene if the situation became too dangerous. "Remember," Patricia said during our final briefing, "your primary objective is survival. Gathering evidence is secondary. If things go wrong, activate the panic button and run. Don't try to be a hero." As I drove toward Lake Tahoe, I thought about Sarah and how I wished I could call her one last time. If something went wrong this weekend, I wanted her to know that I finally found the courage she always believed I had inside me. The mountain roads leading to the cabin were exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. Tall pine trees, crystal clear air, and spectacular views that made you feel connected to something larger than yourself. But today, those same roads felt like they were leading me toward a trap that might cost me my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Can't wait to see you, brother. This is going to be a weekend we'll never forget." The cruel irony of calling me brother while planning my murder wasn't lost on me. But Derek was right about one thing: this would definitely be a weekend none of us would ever forget. The family cabin looked exactly as it had during countless childhood summers, but approaching it now felt like walking into a beautifully decorated tomb. Janet's car was already in the driveway along with Derek's truck and a rental vehicle I didn't recognize that undoubtedly belonged to Marcus Sullivan. I parked next to Derek's truck and noticed the bed was covered with a heavy tarp, hiding whatever equipment they had brought for my planned murder. The irony that they were using our grandfather's beloved retreat as the location for ending my life made the betrayal even more devastating. Patricia's voice crackled through my earpiece. "I've got visual on the cabin. Marcus Sullivan arrived 2 hours ago. Remember, stay calm and act natural. We're recording everything." The front door opened before I could knock, and Janet appeared with the same warm smile she had worn throughout my childhood. "Braxton, I'm so glad you decided to join us. Come in, sweetheart." Her performance was flawless. If I hadn't known about her plans, I would have believed she was genuinely happy to see me. But now I recognized the calculating coldness behind her eyes, the same expression she must have worn while poisoning my father and grandfather. The cabin's interior was exactly as I remembered rustic furniture built by my grandfather's hands, family photos spanning 3 generations, and the massive stone fireplace where we had roasted marshmallows during countless summer evenings. But the presence of Marcus Sullivan transformed the familiar space into something threatening. Marcus was a lean man in his 50s with prison tattoos covering his forearms and dead eyes that revealed no emotion. He sat in my grandfather's favorite chair like he owned the place, drinking beer and watching me with predatory interest. "So you're the famous Braxton," Marcus said in a voice that sounded like gravel grinding against concrete. "Derek's told me all about you." Derek emerged from the kitchen carrying fishing gear, his expression unreadable. "Hey, brother, glad you made it. We've got some great activities planned for this weekend." The word activities carried obvious sinister implications, but I forced myself to smile and respond normally. "Sounds perfect. I could use some relaxation after this crazy week." Amanda and Tyler arrived an hour later, both appearing nervous and uncomfortable around Marcus. They clearly didn't understand why a dangerous stranger was part of our family vacation, which confirmed Patricia's intelligence that they were meant to be eliminated after helping dispose of my body. "Uncle Marcus is an old family friend," Janet explained with practiced casualness. "He's going to help us with some business discussions this weekend." The business discussions obviously referred to my planned murder, but Amanda and Tyler accepted the explanation without question. They had no idea they were walking into their own execution. Dinner was a surreal experience. Janet had prepared my favorite meal from childhood grilled salmon corn on the cob and her famous potato salad. We sat around the dining table where I had eaten thousands of meals, but now I was sharing food with people planning to kill me before the weekend ended. "Remember when Dad taught us to fish off the North Dock?" Derek asked, his voice carrying false nostalgia. "Those were such great times." The reference to Dad stung because Derek was talking about my father, the man Janet had murdered with slow poison. Derek had grown up calling him Dad while knowing he wasn't his biological parent, participating in the deception that had torn our family apart. As the evening progressed, I began recording conversations using the hidden microphone Patricia had provided. The challenge was encouraging them to reveal their plans without appearing suspicious or prompting them to accelerate their timeline. "I've been thinking about Grandfather William a lot lately," I said during dessert. "It's still hard to believe he's gone." Janet's expression flickered for just a moment, revealing something cold beneath her maternal facade. "He was a wonderful man. Such a shame his heart gave out so suddenly." But Marcus couldn't resist adding his own commentary. "Sometimes old men outlive their usefulness. Nature has ways of cleaning up loose ends." The comment was clearly directed at me, a not-so-subtle threat disguised as philosophical observation. Derek nodded in agreement, while Amanda and Tyler looked confused by the inappropriate remark. Later that evening, Janet suggested we all sit around the fireplace for old time's sake. As she poured wine for everyone, I noticed she was giving me a different bottle than everyone else was drinking. The liquid in my glass had a slightly cloudy appearance that made me extremely suspicious. "To family," Janet toasted, raising her glass. "And to saying goodbye to the past so we can embrace the future." I pretended to drink while actually spilling most of the wine onto the floor beside my chair. If Janet was trying to drug me, I wasn't going to make her job easier, but I needed to appear intoxicated to maintain the illusion that her plan was working. Over the next hour, I gradually began acting drowsy and disoriented while secretly remaining completely alert. Janet watched my performance with satisfaction, clearly believing the drugs were taking effect as planned. "Braxton looks tired," Derek observed. "Maybe you should lie down for a while, brother." The suggestion that I go to one of the bedrooms alone was obviously an invitation for them to kill me in private. But I needed to continue gathering evidence before the situation turned violent. "I'm fine," I replied, slurring my words slightly. "Just enjoying being here with everyone." Marcus stood up and stretched his movements, suggesting he was preparing for physical activity. "Fresh mountain air can be exhausting for city folks. Why don't we take a walk outside and clear our heads?" A nighttime walk in the isolated forest surrounding the cabin would be the perfect location for murder. They could kill me, weight my body with chains, and dump me in the lake with no witnesses and minimal evidence. But as we prepared to go outside, Derek made a critical mistake. He thought I was too drugged to understand his whispered conversation with Marcus near the front door, but Patricia's listening equipment captured every word. "How long before the drugs put him completely under?" Derek asked. "Another 15 minutes, Marcus replied. "Then we load him in the boat and finish this. Your mother wants it done before midnight so we can start cleaning up the evidence." They were planning to drown me in the lake, probably after torturing me to find out what I knew about their crimes. The casual way they discussed my murder revealed how many times they had probably done this before. Patricia's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Federal agents are moving into position. Keep them talking for 10 more minutes, then activate the panic button." But as we walked toward the door, Janet made a discovery that changed everything. She had been watching me carefully during dinner and noticed that my wine glass was still full despite my apparent intoxication. "Interesting," she said, her maternal voice disappearing completely. "Someone who's been drinking heavily shouldn't have a full glass." Marcus immediately understood the implication. He grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back while Derek searched my jacket, quickly finding the hidden recording device. "Well, well," Janet said, her mask finally slipping completely. "It seems our dear Braxton has been gathering evidence. How long have you known about our plans?" The pretense was over. My mother stood before me, revealed as the calculating killer she had always been, while the man I had called brother held a gun to my head. Amanda and Tyler cowered in the corner, finally understanding they had walked into something far more dangerous than a family vacation. "Long enough to know you murdered my father and grandfather," I replied, no longer bothering to hide my knowledge. "And long enough to know you're planning to kill me too." Janet laughed, a sound completely devoid of warmth or humanity. "You always were too smart for your own good, Braxton. Just like your grandfather. He started asking inconvenient questions too." Derek pressed the gun harder against my skull. "Should I finish this now, Mom?" "Not yet," Janet replied thoughtfully. "First, I want to know exactly what evidence he's gathered and who else knows about our business. We might need to eliminate additional witnesses." The situation had become deadly, but I had successfully recorded their confessions to multiple murders. Even if they killed me, the evidence would survive to ensure justice for my family. Patricia would make sure of that. But I wasn't ready to die yet. These people had stolen my inheritance, murdered my family, and planned to destroy my reputation after killing me. They deserved to face consequences for their crimes, and I intended to live long enough to watch them pay. "You made one critical mistake," I told Janet as Marcus and Derek prepared to move me outside. "You assumed I would always be the weak, passive victim you've been manipulating my entire life. But you forgot that I'm William Peterson's grandson, and he raised me to fight for what's right." Janet's confident expression flickered slightly. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the federal agents surrounding this cabin right now," I replied with a smile. And the fact that you've just confessed to multiple murders on recording equipment that's broadcasting live to FBI headquarters. As if summoned by my words, powerful spotlights suddenly illuminated the cabin from all directions. A voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is the FBI. The building is surrounded. Come out with your hands visible." The next few minutes were chaos. Derek panicked and accidentally discharged his gun into the ceiling while Marcus grabbed Amanda as a human shield. Janet tried to destroy evidence by throwing documents into the fireplace, but federal agents were already breaching the front and back doors simultaneously. "Nobody move," an FBI agent shouted as tactical teams swarmed through the cabin. "Everyone on the ground now." I watched with satisfaction as the people who had destroyed my family were handcuffed and arrested. Janet maintained her defiant attitude, even in defeat, glaring at me with pure hatred as agents read her rights. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed. "This family business is bigger than you understand. There are people who will make you pay for this." But her threats felt empty now. The woman who had controlled my life through fear and manipulation was just another criminal being loaded into a police car. The power she had held over me for 28 years evaporated the moment those handcuffs clicked into place. Derek was crying as agents led him away, finally understanding that his privileged lifestyle was built on murder and theft. "I didn't know about Dad and Grandpa," he kept repeating. "I thought we were just moving money around." Marcus remained silent, his expression revealing no emotion as he was arrested for conspiracy to commit murder. Professional criminals understand that talking to law enforcement only makes their situations worse. Amanda and Tyler were released after brief questioning, both traumatized by discovering how close they had come to being murdered by their own aunt. They had been pawns in Janet's scheme, but unlike Derek, they were genuinely innocent of any serious crimes. As the FBI finished processing the crime scene, I stood on the cabin's front porch and looked out over Lake Tahoe. The same view that had filled me with joy during childhood summers now represented something entirely different. The place where justice finally caught up with the people who had destroyed my family. Patricia approached from her command post carrying boxes of evidence that would ensure convictions for everyone involved in the conspiracy. "You did good work," she said with professional respect. "Those recordings will put Janet away for life, and the financial evidence will help us recover most of the stolen money." I thought about calling Sarah to tell her what had happened, but decided that conversation could wait until I had processed everything myself. Right now, I just wanted to stand in the place my grandfather had built and feel his presence one more time. The cabin would need extensive cleaning and probably some psychological healing before it could become a place of happiness again. But someday I hoped to bring my own children here and share stories about the great man who built it with his own hands and the courage it takes to fight for justice, even when it costs everything. For now, though, I was simply grateful to be alive and to know that my father and grandfather could finally rest in peace. Their murders had been avenged, and the family legacy they had worked so hard to build would be restored to honor their memory. The arrest of Janet, Derek, and Marcus should have been the end of this nightmare, but as federal agents were processing the crime scene, Patricia pulled me aside with disturbing news. "We have a problem," she said urgently. Our surveillance equipment detected 3 vehicles leaving the area right after the arrests. Janet's criminal network is larger than we initially understood. The implications hit me immediately. Janet had been working with organized crime figures for years, and they wouldn't appreciate having their money laundering operation exposed. Even with the main conspirators in custody, I could still be in danger from associates seeking revenge or trying to recover stolen funds. "How many people are we talking about?" I asked. "At least 6 individuals with connections to the Las Vegas crime families," Patricia replied. "They've been using your family's construction business to clean millions of dollars over the past decade. Your mother's arrest just cost them a major asset." Agent Sarah Martinez, the FBI case supervisor, joined our conversation with additional concerning information. "We intercepted communications, suggesting there's a contract out on your life. Someone is offering $200,000 for your elimination. The price on my head was both flattering and terrifying. Apparently, my testimony was valuable enough that professional criminals were willing to pay substantial money to silence me permanently. "What are my options?" I asked. "Witness protection," Agent Martinez replied immediately. "We can relocate you with a new identity until the trials are concluded and the criminal network is dismantled." But the idea of abandoning everything and starting over with a false identity felt like letting the criminals win. My grandfather and father had died defending the family legacy, and I wasn't going to run away from that responsibility now. "There has to be another way," I said. "These people have already taken enough from my family." Patricia and Agent Martinez exchanged glances before Patricia spoke. "There is one option, but it's extremely dangerous. We could use you as bait to draw out the remaining criminals, then arrest them when they make their move." The plan was risky, but appealing. Instead of hiding from my enemies, I would help the FBI capture them and end their threat permanently. It meant staying in Sacramento and maintaining my normal routine while secretly being protected by federal agents. "I'll do it," I decided, "but I want guarantees that innocent people won't be endangered." Over the next week, the FBI transformed my apartment into a fortress disguised as a normal residence. Hidden cameras monitored every angle, while agents posed as neighbors, delivery drivers, and maintenance workers to provide constant surveillance. The plan was to let word spread that I was back home and vulnerable, encouraging the criminals to attempt their revenge. When they made their move, federal agents would be ready to capture them. But on Thursday evening, I received a phone call that changed everything. Sarah, my ex-girlfriend, was crying hysterically. "Braxton, someone broke into my apartment," she sobbed. "They left a note saying they have information about your family situation. They want to meet with me tomorrow night." My blood turned to ice. The criminals weren't targeting me directly. They were going after people I cared about to force me into the open. Sarah had no idea how dangerous these people were or what they were capable of doing. "Sarah, listen carefully," I said urgently. "Do not meet with these people. They're connected to organized crime, and they'll hurt you to get to me." "But the note says they have evidence that could help your case," she replied. "What if it's legitimate information?" I immediately called Patricia and Agent Martinez, who confirmed my worst fears. The criminals were using Sarah as bait to lure me into a trap. If I tried to protect her by meeting their demands, they would kill us both. If I stayed away, they would probably kill her anyway to send a message. "This is exactly what they want," Agent Martinez explained. "They're forcing you to choose between your safety and hers. Either way, they win." But I couldn't let Sarah die because of my family's crimes. She had broken up with me because I wouldn't stand up to Janet's abuse, and now my failure to act sooner was putting her life in danger. "I have to go," I told the agents. "I won't let them hurt her because of me." "That's suicide," Patricia argued. "They're professional killers. You're not trained for this kind of operation." But Agent Martinez had a different idea. "What if we turn this into our own trap? Let Braxton keep the meeting but surround the location with federal agents. When the criminals show themselves, we arrest everyone." The plan was dangerous, but feasible. I would meet with Sarah at the specified location while wearing wire equipment and GPS tracking. Federal agents would be positioned throughout the area, ready to move in when the criminals revealed themselves. The meeting was scheduled for Friday night at Raley Field, the minor league baseball stadium in West Sacramento. The location was both public enough to seem safe and isolated enough for an ambush after hours. I spent Friday preparing for what could be my final confrontation with Janet's criminal associates. Patricia provided me with body armor disguised as a regular jacket, along with communication equipment that would allow agents to monitor everything in real time. "Remember," Patricia instructed, "your job is to identify the criminals and keep them talking until we can move in. Don't try to be heroic. These people have killed before." That evening, I drove to Raley Field with my heart pounding and my hands shaking. Sarah's car was already in the parking lot, which meant she had either arrived early or was being held by the criminals as additional leverage. As I approached the stadium entrance, a man in a dark suit stepped out of the shadows. He looked like a professional bodyguard with cold eyes and a bulge under his jacket that suggested he was carrying a weapon. "Mr. Peterson," he said politely, "please come with me. Ms. Chen is waiting inside." The fact that he knew Sarah's last name confirmed these weren't random criminals looking for quick money. They had researched my personal relationships and planned this operation carefully. I followed the man through the stadium entrance and onto the baseball field where Sarah was sitting in the dugout with two other men standing nearby. She looked terrified but unharmed, which meant they were keeping her alive as motivation for my cooperation. "Braxton," she called out when she saw me. "I'm sorry. They said they just wanted to talk." One of the men stepped forward, a well-dressed individual in his 60s with silver hair and expensive clothing. Despite his grandfather appearance, his eyes held the same predatory coldness I had seen in Marcus Sullivan. "Mr. Peterson, my name is Vincent Carrera," he said with a slight Italian accent. "I represent certain business interests that were affected by your mother's recent legal troubles." Vincent Carrera was a name I recognized from FBI briefings. He was a high-ranking member of a Las Vegas crime family with connections to money laundering operations throughout the western United States. "Your family business has been very useful to our operations," Vincent continued. "We're hoping to reach an understanding that allows those relationships to continue." The understanding he was proposing obviously involved me taking over Janet's role in the criminal enterprise. They wanted to use Peterson Construction to continue laundering money with me as their new front man. "I'm not interested in continuing my mother's criminal activities," I replied firmly. Vincent smiled, but the expression contained no warmth. "I think you misunderstand the nature of this conversation, Mr. Peterson. We're not making a request. We're informing you of how things will work going forward." One of his associates moved closer to Sarah, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture that was clearly threatening. The message was obvious: cooperate or watch her die. "Sarah has nothing to do with this," I said. "Let her go and we can discuss your proposal. Ms. Chen becomes our insurance policy that you'll honor our agreement," Vincent replied. "As long as you cooperate, she remains safe. If you cause problems, she pays the price." This was exactly the trap Agent Martinez had predicted. They were using Sarah to control my behavior while forcing me to become their new money laundering operation. Even if I agreed to their demands, they would probably kill us both eventually to eliminate witnesses. But Vincent had made one critical mistake. He assumed I was the same passive victim Janet had manipulated for years. He didn't realize I was wearing recording equipment and that federal agents were surrounding the stadium. "Before I agree to anything," I said, "I need to understand exactly what you're asking me to do." Vincent was happy to explain the details of their criminal operation, apparently believing he had complete control of the situation. He described how millions of dollars in drug money, human trafficking profits, and other illegal funds were processed through construction projects that existed only on paper. "Your mother was very efficient," he said with admiration. "She could clean $5 million per month without attracting attention from banking authorities. We expect you to maintain that level of productivity." As Vincent continued detailing their money laundering methods, I was gathering evidence that would help the FBI dismantle their entire operation. He was so confident in his control over the situation that he revealed names, locations, and financial details that would lead to dozens of arrests. But our conversation was interrupted when Patricia's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Braxton, we have a problem. 3 more vehicles just arrived at the stadium. They brought backup we weren't expecting." The situation was escalating beyond what the FBI had planned for. Instead of capturing a few criminals, we were facing what appeared to be a small army of organized crime figures who had come to eliminate both Sarah and me. "It looks like our business discussion is about to conclude," Vincent said, apparently receiving information through his own communication device. "My associates have confirmed that you've been working with federal law enforcement. That's very disappointing, Mr. Peterson." The pretense of negotiation was over. Vincent's men drew their weapons while additional criminals emerged from the stadium's upper levels. We were surrounded by professional killers with no intention of letting either Sarah or me leave alive. But Vincent had underestimated the FBI's commitment to this operation. As his men prepared to execute us, stadium lights suddenly blazed to life, and federal agents emerged from concealment positions throughout the ballpark. "This is the FBI." Agent Martinez's voice boomed over the public address system. "Drop your weapons and surrender immediately." What followed was a gun battle that felt like something from an action movie. Vincent's men opened fire while federal agents returned shots from multiple directions. Sarah and I dove for cover behind the dugout while bullets flew overhead. The firefight lasted only minutes before superior FBI training and numbers overwhelmed the criminals. Vincent was wounded while trying to escape through the outfield, and his surviving associates surrendered when they realized resistance was futile. As paramedics treated the wounded and agents processed the arrested criminals, I held Sarah in my arms and realized how close we had both come to dying. The price for exposing Janet's crimes had been higher than I ever imagined, but we had survived and helped the FBI capture a major criminal organization. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her voice still shaking from the trauma. "It's over," I replied, hoping I was telling the truth. But even as federal agents led Vincent Carrera away in handcuffs, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were still loose ends that might come back to haunt us. Criminal organizations like his don't disappear overnight, and there could be other associates seeking revenge for their losses. For now, though, Sarah and I were alive, and the people who had threatened us were in federal custody. It was a victory, but one that came at a cost that would take time to fully understand. The capture of Vincent Carrera and his associates should have ended the nightmare. But 3 days later, I received a phone call that proved our troubles were far from over. "Braxton, this is Agent Martinez. We need to meet immediately. There's been a development." Her tone suggested the development wasn't good news. I met her and Patricia at FBI headquarters in downtown Sacramento, where they briefed me on intelligence that made my blood run cold. "Vincent Carrera was middle management," Agent Martinez explained. "The real power behind this operation is his uncle Anthony Carrera, who runs the entire West Coast money laundering network from Las Vegas. And he's not happy about his nephew's arrest." Patricia spread surveillance photos across the conference table, showing an elderly man in expensive suits meeting with various criminal figures. Anthony Carrera looked like someone's grandfather, but the FBI had connected him to dozens of murders over the past 30 years. "Anthony is old school," Agent Martinez continued. "He believes in personal revenge for family insults. His nephew's arrest represents a direct attack on the Carrera family honor." The implications were clear. Even with Vincent in custody, the threat against Sarah and me had escalated rather than disappeared. We were now dealing with a more dangerous enemy who had greater resources and fewer scruples about civilian casualties. "What's our protection status?" I asked. "That's the problem," Patricia replied grimly. "Anthony has connections throughout law enforcement, including federal agencies. We can't guarantee your safety using traditional witness protection methods." The revelation that corrupt federal agents might be working for the Carrera family was deeply disturbing. It meant nowhere was truly safe, and anyone could be a potential threat. But the worst news came when Agent Martinez opened another file folder. "Yesterday morning, Sarah was kidnapped from her apartment building. We believe Anthony's men are holding her as leverage to force your cooperation." The room started spinning. While I had been feeling safe in FBI protection, criminals had taken the woman I loved and were probably torturing her to make me comply with their demands. "Where is she?" I asked urgently. "We don't know," Agent Martinez admitted. "But we intercepted a communication suggesting she's being held at one of Anthony's properties in the Nevada desert. The problem is he owns dozens of properties, and we don't have probable cause to search them all." Patricia handed me a cell phone. "Anthony wants to speak with you directly. He's scheduled a call for noon today." I looked at the clock on the conference room wall. 11:45. In 15 minutes, I would be speaking with a man who had ordered the kidnapping of the woman I loved and was probably planning to kill us both regardless of what I agreed to do. At exactly noon, the phone rang. "Mr. Peterson," a gravelly voice said without preamble. "My name is Anthony Carrera. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You cost my family millions of dollars and put my nephew in federal prison. That represents a debt that must be paid with interest." Anthony's voice carried the authority of someone who had never been refused anything in his life. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a sentencing. "Your girlfriend is enjoying my hospitality in the Nevada desert," he continued. "Whether she continues enjoying it depends entirely on your willingness to cooperate." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want you to take over your mother's money laundering operation exactly as Vincent proposed. You will process $5 million per month through your construction business, and you will never speak to law enforcement about our arrangement." The demand was identical to Vincent's proposal, but Anthony's leverage was far more personal. He wasn't just threatening my life. He was torturing someone I loved to ensure my compliance. "How do I know Sarah is still alive?" I asked. Anthony put her on the phone, and her voice nearly broke my heart. She was crying and obviously terrified, but she was trying to be brave for my sake. "Braxton, don't do what they're asking," she said through tears. "Don't let them turn you into a criminal because of me." "Sarah, I'm going to get you out of this," I promised before Anthony took the phone back. "You have 24 hours to make your decision," Anthony said. "Meet my representatives tomorrow at midnight at the Peterson construction office. Come alone or your girlfriend starts losing body parts." The line went dead, leaving me staring at federal agents who had no immediate solutions to offer. "We can't track the call," Patricia said after checking with technical specialists. "Anthony is using encrypted communication methods that make him impossible to locate." Agent Martinez attempted to be reassuring. "We'll find her, Braxton. The FBI has extensive resources for this type of situation." But 24 hours wasn't enough time for a traditional investigation. Sarah could be tortured or killed while federal agents were following proper procedures and gathering evidence for search warrants. "I have to meet with Anthony's people," I decided. "It's the only way to find out where they're holding Sarah." "That's exactly what he wants," Patricia argued. "You show up at the meeting, he kills you, and Sarah then disappears with no witnesses." She was probably right, but I couldn't abandon Sarah to save myself. The guilt of letting her suffer because of my family's crimes would be unbearable even if I survived. "There has to be a way to turn this situation around," I said. "Anthony thinks he holds all the cards, but maybe we can surprise him." Agent Martinez looked thoughtful. "What if we use the meeting as an opportunity to gather intelligence? You keep Anthony's people talking while we trace their communications and identify their base of operations." It was a long shot, but it might be our only chance to save Sarah and capture Anthony before he disappeared or killed additional victims. "I'll do it," I decided, "but I want backup close enough to help if things go wrong." The next 20 hours were spent preparing for what could be my final confrontation with the Carrera crime family. FBI technicians outfitted me with the most advanced surveillance equipment available, including tracking devices that would allow them to follow me even if I was taken to Anthony's desert compound. "Remember," Patricia instructed during final briefings, "your primary objective is survival. If you can gather intelligence about Sarah's location, that's a bonus. But don't take unnecessary risks trying to be heroic." But as midnight approached, I knew heroism might be the only option. Anthony Carrera had built his criminal empire on the assumption that people would choose personal safety over moral courage. He was about to discover that some people can't be intimidated into abandoning the principles their families died defending. The Peterson construction office was located in an industrial area of Sacramento that was deserted after business hours. Perfect for a criminal meeting with minimal witnesses. I arrived 15 minutes early and waited in the parking lot, watching shadows and checking my communication equipment one final time. At exactly midnight, 3 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot and surrounded my car. Men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles, all carrying weapons and wearing expressions that suggested they had no intention of letting me leave alive. One of them approached my car and gestured for me to follow him into the construction office. As we walked through the building where my grandfather had built his legitimate business empire, I couldn't help thinking about how criminal activity had corrupted everything he had worked to create. Anthony's representatives had set up a command center in the main conference room, complete with computers, communication equipment, and enough firepower to fight a small war. These weren't amateur criminals. They were professional operatives running a military-style operation. "Mr. Peterson," one of them said as I entered the room, "Mr. Carrera is waiting to speak with you." A video screen showed Anthony sitting in what appeared to be a luxurious desert estate. Behind him, I could see Nevada mountains in the background, which gave the FBI a general geographic area to search. "Have you made your decision?" Anthony asked without pleasantries. "I need proof that Sarah is alive and unharmed," I replied. Anthony gestured to someone off camera, and Sarah was brought into view. She looked exhausted and frightened, but appeared physically unharmed. Relief flooded through me at seeing she was still alive. "Now you've seen her," Anthony said. "Do you agree to our terms?" "I agree." I lied, hoping to keep him talking while FBI agents triangulated his location. "Excellent. My men will provide you with detailed instructions for processing money through your construction business. You will begin operations next Monday with your first $5 million transaction." As Anthony's representatives began explaining their money laundering procedures, I was secretly recording everything for federal prosecutors. They revealed bank account numbers, shell corporation names, and operational details that would help the FBI dismantle their entire network. But our conversation was interrupted when one of Anthony's men received an urgent phone call. His expression changed immediately, and he began barking orders to the other operatives in the room. "We have federal agents surrounding the building," he announced. "This whole meeting was a setup." The trap had been sprung, but these criminals were too professional to surrender easily. They immediately began destroying evidence and preparing for armed confrontation with law enforcement. "Kill Peterson," the lead operative ordered. Mr. Carrera's instructions are clear about eliminating witnesses. But before they could carry out Anthony's execution order, FBI tactical teams breached the building from multiple entry points. Smoke grenades filled the conference room while agents shouted commands for everyone to surrender. The gunfight was intense, but brief. Anthony's men were outnumbered and surrounded with no escape routes available. Within minutes, they were either dead or in federal custody. But the victory felt hollow because Sarah was still being held prisoner at Anthony's Nevada compound. Even with his Sacramento operatives captured, he could still kill her and disappear before law enforcement tracked him down. We got GPS coordinates from their communication equipment. Agent Martinez reported as paramedics treated wounded agents. Anthony is at a ranch compound 60 miles northeast of Las Vegas. Nevada State Police and federal agents are moving to surround the property. The next few hours were the longest of my life. I sat in an FBI command vehicle listening to radio communications as law enforcement agencies coordinated Sarah's rescue operation. Every minute that passed increased the possibility that Anthony would kill her out of spite or panic. Finally, Agent Martinez received the call we had been waiting for. Target acquired, hostage secured, suspect in custody. Sarah was safe. Anthony Carrera was under arrest. The criminal network that had terrorized my family for years was finally dismantled. But even as I felt overwhelming relief, I knew this victory had come at enormous cost. My relationship with Sarah would need extensive healing after the trauma she had endured. The family business would require complete restructuring to eliminate all traces of criminal activity. And I would spend years dealing with the psychological aftermath of discovering that the people who raised me were killers and thieves. Still, justice had been served. My father and grandfather could finally rest in peace, knowing their murders had been avenged and their legacy had been restored to honor their memory. The nightmare that began with Janet's cruel words at breakfast was finally over. But the real work of rebuilding my life and relationships was just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the same federal courthouse where Janet Derrick and the entire Carrera criminal network would face sentencing for their crimes. The legal proceedings had been extensive, with dozens of defendants and hundreds of charges ranging from money laundering to multiple murders. The transformation in my life during those months had been remarkable. With FBI assistance, I had completely restructured Peterson Construction Company, eliminating all connections to criminal activity and returning the business to the honest practices my grandfather had established. The financial recovery exceeded even Harold Peterson's optimistic projections. Federal authorities had seized over $15 million from various accounts controlled by Janet and the Carrera family. After legal expenses and victim compensation, I inherited legitimate assets worth nearly $4 million. But more importantly, Sarah and I had rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual trust and shared trauma. The kidnapping experience had been horrific for her, but it also revealed strengths and resilience neither of us knew she possessed. "Are you ready for this?" she asked as we climbed the courthouse steps for the sentencing hearings. "I've been ready for this moment since I was 8 years old," I replied, thinking about childhood memories of Janet's emotional abuse that finally made sense in context. The courthouse was packed with journalists, law enforcement officials, and families of other victims who had been murdered or defrauded by the criminal network. Janet's crimes had affected dozens of people over the years, and today represented justice for all of them. Janet entered the courtroom wearing orange prison clothing and handcuffs. Her appearance dramatically changed from the sophisticated woman who had controlled my family for decades. 6 months in federal custody had aged her considerably, and she looked like what she truly was, a criminal facing the consequences of her choices. Derrick sat separately from Janet, having cooperated with federal prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. Learning that he wasn't my biological brother and that his entire identity was built on lies had broken him psychologically. He spent most of the hearing crying and apologizing to victims' families. But it was Anthony Carrera's sentencing that provided the most satisfaction. The elderly crime boss who had terrorized families for decades received multiple life sentences with no possibility of parole. At 74 years old, he would die in federal prison. Janet Peterson. Judge Margaret Rodriguez said as she prepared to announce Janet's sentence, "You stand before this court as someone who violated every sacred trust of family friendship and community. You murdered your own husband and father-in-law for money. You stole from your son and attempted to have him killed. You corrupted a legitimate business to serve criminal purposes." Janet maintained her defiant attitude even in defeat, glaring at me with hatred as the judge continued speaking. "The court sentences you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the murders of Robert Peterson and William Peterson. Additional sentences for money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy will run consecutively." Janet would never leave federal prison. The woman who had controlled my life through fear and manipulation would spend her remaining years locked in a concrete cell exactly as she deserved. Derrick received 15 years in federal prison for his role in the money laundering operation. His cooperation with investigators and obvious psychological manipulation by Janet earned him some sympathy from the court, but his willing participation in criminal activity still required punishment. After the sentencing hearings concluded, Sarah and I drove to the Lake Tahoe cabin for the first time since the night of Janet's arrest. The property had been thoroughly cleaned and renovated, eliminating all traces of the criminal activity that had occurred there. Standing on the dock where my grandfather had taught me to fish, I felt his presence more strongly than at any time since his death. The family legacy he had worked so hard to build was finally restored to honor his memory. "What happens now?" Sarah asked as we watched the sun set over the lake. "Now we build something better than what came before," I replied. Over the following year, I transformed Peterson Construction into something my grandfather would have been proud of. We specialized in affordable housing projects for low-income families, veteran housing initiatives, and community development programs that served people instead of exploiting them. The Lake Tahoe cabin became a retreat center for survivors of family violence and organized crime, providing counseling services and support for people recovering from trauma similar to what Sarah and I had experienced. I also established the William Peterson Memorial Foundation, using recovered funds to provide scholarships for young people pursuing careers in construction engineering and other trades that build communities rather than destroying them. Derek was released from federal prison after serving 8 years of his sentence, having earned early release through good behavior and participation in educational programs. The experience had fundamentally changed him, and he approached me with genuine remorse for his past actions. "I know I can never undo the damage I caused," he said during our first meeting after his release, "but I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." I offered him a job at Peterson Construction, starting in an entry-level position where he could learn honest work and contribute something positive to society. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a chance at redemption that my grandfather would have supported. Sarah and I were married 2 years after Janet's sentencing in a small ceremony at the Lake Tahoe cabin, surrounded by friends who had become our chosen family. Patricia Hendricks served as Sarah's matron of honor, having become a close friend during the investigation and recovery process. Our first child, William Peterson Matthews, was born 3 years later. Holding my son in the cabin where his great-grandfather had taught me about integrity and courage, I felt the family legacy continuing in the healthiest possible way. Janet remained in federal prison, her appeals exhausted, and her attempts to manipulate prison staff unsuccessful. I visited her once 5 years after her sentencing, hoping to find some closure or understanding. "I'm not sorry for anything I did," she told me through the prison glass. "You destroyed this family by refusing to mind your own business." Even facing life imprisonment, Janet was incapable of accepting responsibility for her crimes or acknowledging the pain she had caused. I left that visit knowing I would never see her again, but feeling grateful for the lesson about choosing character over convenience. The business continued to grow and prosper, employing dozens of people in honest work that served communities throughout Northern California. Every project we completed honored the memory of the grandfather who taught me that success means nothing without integrity. Amanda and Tyler had recovered from their trauma and built new lives far from the criminal influence that had nearly destroyed them. They visited the cabin annually for memorial services honoring our grandfather and the values he represented. On the 10th anniversary of Grandfather William's death, I stood before employees, friends, and family at the cabin to share the most important lesson his life had taught me. "True family isn't defined by blood or genetics," I said, looking at the people who had chosen to stand with me through the darkest periods of this journey. "True family is defined by love, loyalty, and the courage to fight for what's right, even when the cost seems unbearable." My grandfather built this cabin with his own hands as a place where family could gather and remember what matters most. For too many years, it was corrupted by people who valued money more than love, and power more than truth. But today, it stands as proof that justice may be delayed, but truth ultimately prevails when we have the courage to fight for what's right. The family legacy my grandfather worked to create has been restored, not through revenge or hatred, but through the choice to build something better than what came before. Sarah held our son as I concluded my remarks, and I thought about the summers William would spend at this cabin, learning the same lessons about integrity and courage that had guided me through the hardest decisions of my life. The story that began with Janet's cruel words about not being wanted had transformed into something entirely different, a testament to the power of choosing love over hatred, justice over convenience, and family over fear. In the end, the people who truly wanted me here weren't the ones who shared my genetics. They were the ones who shared my values and stood beside me when standing required courage. That night, as we sat around the same fireplace where Janet had once planned my murder, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you've honored the memory of people you love and built something worthy of their sacrifice. The cabin was finally what my grandfather had always intended it to be, a place where family gathered to celebrate the bonds that make life meaningful and the courage that makes justice possible. My name is Braxton Peterson, and this is my story of learning that sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose to build, rather than the one you're born into. But it's also a story about fighting for what's right, even when the fight costs everything you thought you had. Because in the end, the only inheritance worth leaving is a legacy of integrity, courage, and love that inspires others to choose truth over convenience and justice over fear. Thank you for listening to my story. As you've heard my journey from betrayal to justice, I'm curious about your own experiences with difficult family dynamics. Have you ever had to make the hard choice between family loyalty and doing what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in the darkest moments. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to seek justice. Until next time, remember that your true family consists of the people who stand with you when standing requires courage, not just those who share your DNA. Take care, and thank you for being part of this community, where truth and healing matter more than anything else.